So I'm going to kind of retouch on the first part of chapter 17, and we're going to get through 17 today. It's very interesting is that, one of the people I use is Tom Bradford, and it took him 3 weeks to get through chapter 17, and he's much more learned than I am about this. So, I've cut out a lot of the stuff that makes no sense to me, because if it makes no sense to me, I can't teach it to you. But we still spent, this will be the third week, because we did 16 and then first part of 17, and I started back over in 17 again last week, and we didn't get much further the second time. So hopefully we'll get through this week. All right, so verse 1. This is what we're going to be reading about chapter 17 is the doom of Babylon, what's going to happen to Babylon. In verse 1, then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. All right, this is a fun lady. She's, you remember what the title for her was? No? Yeah. If you're in King James, it's the scarlet whore, or you can use harlot or prostitute. It's all the same idea. She is representative of Babylon. So she's synonymous with the term the Great Babylon. We'll kind of fill that in as we go through it. And it says, she sits on many waters. Good morning. Hey.
Yeah.
She sits on many waters. And the waters here represent, and we're going to find that out here, nations. And then what's happening is she is spreading immorality in the world, okay? And she's able to attract the earth dwellers. And whenever we see the term earth dwellers, those would be those of humans who have not accepted Christ, okay? So those are people of the earth. Those are non-believers. We're people of what? That was a question.
The finger?
Yeah, the finger. But the index finger, not the other one. We're citizens of heaven. Okay, so there's heaven and then there's earth. Okay, and the earth dwellers, you don't want to be called an earth dweller. Okay, so they commit a number of immoralities, and she has a cup. We talked about that cup, and that contains these immoralities that we talked about here. And it's just, the sense here is that they become drunk. These guys become drunk. And, that's the point, obviously, when you're describing someone as being drunk, they're out of control. They continue to consume what it is, but they have no logic, there's no rationale in what they do, they just do. And so it's this idea is that this immorality just continues to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And those of us that have been around for a while can attest to the fact that the immorality is getting worse and worse and worse. Now, we're not seeing anything today that has never happened. We're just seeing it more widespread and more out in the open. Okay? I don't think anybody would say that the stuff that's going on today didn't happen back in the 1700s, 1500s, but now it's much more open and much more accepted, okay, by society. All right, so what does Babylon represent? And this is going to be kind of an ongoing theme for this chapter, and it can mean the city, it could be a religious system, or it could be a government, or it could be a combination of them all. But it's this idea that everything that is not of God is part of the Babylonian system.
Ungodly.
Yes, Babylonian system. And if you go back to the story of Babel, you understand that this was an attempt by man after the flood to usurp God's authority. You have the main guy at that point was Nimrod. And when God, after the flood, God told man to spread out, right? Spread out and be fruitful. And what they were supposed to do was go out and create like these little small entities with the families and that kind of thing. And man's desire was to build cities, have everybody come into one city, one location. Everybody could be controlled by one person, and then their goal was to not necessarily become gods, but get to a level where they could commune with gods. And I'm not going to get all into the ziggurats and what they were all about, because there's a lot of different reasons or explanations as to why they built the ziggurats. But bottom line was that their desire was to be able to get closer and commune with the gods, or with God. Okay, so that was the system that was created. There was a religion that was set up. It was a religion that was based on a creature worship. It wasn't worshiping God, and they set up this financial system and this governmental system. Okay, so Babylon represents all of that. So when you see that in the Bible, that's kind of what it's representing. All right. Verse 3, and he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality. And on her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. All right, so this is kind of where we get this description of what the harlot looks like. Okay, now where does John get this vision? Where is he?
It's in heaven, isn't it?
No,
Patmos.
no, it's right there in that first verse.
Wilderness?
Wilderness.
It was a trick question.
Yeah, he goes in the spirit to the wilderness. Now, the wilderness is, we see this a lot of time with a lot of the prophets in the Old Testament. God will take them to the wilderness to show them these visions, give them these visions that they get, to get away from and out there. So it's just the two of them seeing this vision. So they're taken away to the wilderness, and don't forget that we've seen this before already in Revelation. And if you don't remember that, it was the woman who had the sun and the moon, sun at her head, moon at her feet, and 12 stars. Okay, he was in the wilderness when he saw her too. All right, so she's sitting on a scarlet beast. Who do you think that is? Scarlet beast. Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it is. It's the Antichrist. Okay, it's the beast that we've already heard about, that we've been reading about, the beast. Okay, and the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. We've heard that description before. Okay, the woman is clothed in purple and scarlet. We talked about this last week. She's wearing purple and scarlet. Purple represents royalty, and scarlet represents immorality, I think. What is it? Let me just make sure I've got that. No. Yeah, it's blood, but it's also used to signify harlot as well. The combination of these two is seen elsewhere, similar in the Old Testament, and it's going to get the spelling here right. Shanettes, and shanettes we read about in the Old Testament when Israel is forbidden to mix wool with cotton together. So it's a mixture that's forbidden. It's a mixture and I don't know, I can't go into why they don't want the wool and the cotton combined. I guess one's an animal, one's a plant. But this idea that things that are put together, they're mixtures that are not appropriate. So the harlot really shouldn't be wearing purple and red together. First of all, it's kind of garish. You know, it's kind of like, wow. You know, that's a little over the top. So it's like a combination that's really not a very good combination. But that she's got this royalty, which is the government system, and the scarlet, what kind of represents her religion, which is that immorality. And when we're talking about immorality here in this section, the immorality is what's the word? Immorality is, it's that sense of rejection of God, and it's here we go, idolatry. So anytime you have idolatry, you have a group of people that have rejected God. They're worshiping idols. They've supplanted God with what they think are appropriate things to be worshipped. Okay, so the immorality, it includes all the things that we would in the 22nd century would consider immorality, but understand that all those things are part of a religious mindset that says I can do what I want to do when I want to do it, and no one can tell me not to. And that person who can't tell me not to is God. All right, so that all that stuff that immorality comes from essentially a religious mindset of idolatry. Okay, I told you I was watching. I put Skywatch on record because they got this author out. These two authors, they've got a book out. I told you about last week, Dark Covenant. It's really kind of interesting. I watch things on Revelation just kind of just through like okay, well, watch with a grain of salt. And one of their contentions is that the branch just broke. What was I talking about? Oh, the idolatry and the immorality. Man, it'll come back to me. I'm sorry. It'll come back to me. But their whole book is how really what they're putting forth in the argument of their book is that the modern church will be the religion of the Antichrist. Okay, and I can kind of flesh that out as we go along. But oh, I know. Here we go. The one of the things this one author said was that there are places today that have there are Christian exercise locations. And one of the exercises that they do is pole dancing. And because it's a great workout. She said the problem with that is that pole dancing goes all the way back to the poles of is it Aseroth or Ishtar?
Maypoles.
Yeah, the maypoles, where they would actually dance around these poles in a sensuous manner. So it's like we're seeing Christianity accepting more and more and more of these things. It's kind of like Christian yoga. Yoga is used in its original state to get you to a higher plane where you don't talk to God. Obviously, you're talking to demons but somehow we say, okay, if we take it and we make it Jesus, it's okay. And so we're seeing more and more of that as we move along in history, and we're doing. And I say we, I'm not necessarily saying us, but we, the church, are doing more and more of these things after we had spent so much time attacking the Catholic Church for doing the exact same thing. If you look at a lot of stuff the Catholic Church does, they come out of pagan religions. And the reason that they adopted them was so that the pagans wouldn't feel left out. That they would somehow see Christianity as a more, would be a comfortable place for them to come, and they would feel good about being a part of it, because they were still able to keep their holidays and their festivals and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so I thought it was kind of interesting that Christian pole dancing is the next thing. So sign up. All right, so yeah, and I will have to say this though. I probably should. But have y'all ever watched King of Queens? one of the funniest episodes is when he wants her to take up pole dancing. They have this exercise thing, pole dancing at her club. And it is hilarious because she can't do it. And then he ends up showing her how to do it. It's just so funny. Anyway, I probably shouldn't be watching it. But anyway, so he said, verse 4, the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. So we've got these, the gold, precious stones, and pearls. Okay. Remember that Satan really does two things. One is he copies God. The other thing is that in his copying he mocks God. So in this case here, he is mocking God because this is kind of a mocking of what the priest wore. The priest wore that breastplate that had the 12 precious stones on it, right? And he had gold trim. And so this idea that he's got his own priest, if you will, and it's the scarlet harlot. All right, so that's kind of what that represents there, is that trying to show that that same kind of imagery that we see in the Old Testament with the priest. And has a gold cup full of abominations and of unclean things of her immorality. Now this gold cup has abominations in it. And for most of us, abominations is kind of a vague term. What does that mean? Essentially, abominations in this sense is they're basically cursing God. Abomination is this idea of wanting harm to come to somebody, or you're telling something that's not true about somebody. So in this case, the abomination would be about God. So it's saying untrue things about God. And a lot of things would fit under that we might not ordinarily associate with abomination. Idolatry would be one of those abominations, because you're saying, God says, I am the only God, and you're saying, no, you're not. There are many gods. You're just one of them. We tend to think of this cursing as using improper language, right? Dang it, and heck fire, and stuff like that. Chuck Missler, and I think I told you this once before, he doesn't believe that that's what the Bible means by cursing. He believes that cursing is when you take the Lord's, take the Lord's name in vain, is what we use to say, okay, you can't say certain words. But he believes that when you take the Lord's name in vain, what that means is, if I say I'm a Christian and I don't act like a Christian and I don't do what I'm supposed to do and I bring shame onto God, that's my taking his name in vain. Which I think is an interesting viewpoint and would make sense. And when it comes to words, some of the words that we don't accept today were very acceptable 200 years ago. Now, how many of you are comfortable with saying this word right here? Where most of us we hear that word, our ears go, ah!
Nope, doesn't bother me.
Okay, well, Linda, you're the exception to the rule.
It's true.
But it's not something that we would use necessarily in conversation. We would find another word for it. Something that's more acceptable. Okay? So, at any rate, so we're talking about these abominations being basically cursing against God and calling him a liar and saying that you can do whatever you want. God doesn't have any control of your life. You are in control of your life, which is what Satan wants everyone to believe. Okay? Verse 5, and on her forehead a name was written, a mystery. Now in some versions, this is all written out. Does anybody have a version where a mystery doesn't have a comma after it and it's capitalized like everything else?
Yeah.
5.
Mine's capitalized.
Is that the King James?
The NIV version.
NIV. Some versions have it as written, and I think the A is gone, and it's all capitalized with no comma, Mystery Babylon. So what happens is that people begin to think that Mystery Babylon is that they go together. Okay, and that's not necessarily the case. It's a mystery, comma, about Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. So it's not that it's a mystery Babylon, it's a mystery about who this is and what it is that they're about. Okay? And verse 6 says, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints. So where is she getting drunk from? Blood of the saints. So it's the persecution that is driving her. So this idea of Babylon being the world religions and mentality apart from God, their whole purpose is to kill Christians, and during the end times, Jews as well. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. Now, when you read that, what do you think? Wondered greatly. What do you think?
Trying to figure it out.
Trying to figure it out. And that's really kind of what it gives you is like kind of like, but in reality, what it actually is saying here is that John's impressed.
It says I marveled.
I marveled. I was impressed.
Admiration.
Yeah. It's an admiration. It's not a like, what? It's like, wow. Okay? So, if John is having that kind of response to this world system, what do you think most people are going to do? They're going to be impressed as well. Okay? They're going to be impressed as well. So, you can't see this picture. Well, so we'll go on. Oh, can't see that one either. Or that one. Or that one. All right, so verse 7. And the angel said to me, why do you wonder? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So the angel recognizes the fact that John is just in awe of this harlot. And he's like, why are you in awe? Obviously, you don't understand what this is all about, so let me explain it to you. Here's what the story is. Okay? It said in verse 8, the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast that he was and is not and will come. Okay, we're seeing this mocking again. When we see the words was, is not, and about to come, typically what do we hear that connected with?
Jesus.
Jesus and God, right? Okay. This is not about Jesus or God. This is about the beast. Okay? And the beast has the same kind of history. That it was, it is not, and is about to come. And we're going to kind of flesh that out as we go on. Where does the beast come from?
Bottomless pit.
The abyss, the bottomless pit. All right? So there's some argument that this beast, and we also read about the beast earlier, chapter 13, I believe it was, where it described the beast. There are those that believe that what this is that they go through this line of leaders through history that were antichrists, and they come up with the argument that Nimrod will come back. Because if you remember, we talked about the fact that the Antichrist suffered a head wound and came back. If you look at all the great world conquerors through history, some of them can be debated, but Nimrod's the first, and then you go on through the list, and then you get to Hitler, and then the last one who comes will come out of the abyss. The argument there then is that this is not someone walking around with us right now, because no one's come from the abyss hasn't been opened yet. So the person that's coming out of the abyss, the only one that fits the description is Nimrod, because if y'all know the story of Nimrod? We used to use that term to call somebody that was like a geek or something. We used to call them Nimrods. Well, I don't know, it didn't fit. But Nimrod was the king, if you will, of Babel. He was a mighty hunter. Some believe that he became through his life, he somehow became one of the Nephilim, one of the giants. He got the DNA somehow, I don't know how, but they believe that he grew into a mighty man, which was a term used for the Nephilim, a giant. And that he had all this control over all these people. And that one day he was out hunting, and his timeline, remember we talked about Abraham way back, and how Abraham, one of the stories, Hebrew stories, is that Abraham and Nimrod lived in that area at the same time. And that somehow Nimrod found out that Abraham was not worshiping him and the gods, he was worshiping Yahweh, and came after him, and his uncle sent him off someplace else to hide him for a while, and he came back. So you have all this timeline that overlaps because people were living a lot longer then. So in this story, Nimrod and Esau are living at the same time. Nimrod would have been over 200 years old. Esau may have been 15 or 16 at the time. And so, Esau was known as what? The hunter, a mighty hunter, right? And so he's out hunting one day, and he sees Nimrod with his cohorts out there hunting. And he lays an ambush, decides that he wants the fame of killing Nimrod. And so he attacks Nimrod and cuts his head off and kills him. And then he kills his two buddies that are with him. Then the rest of the group finds out, they start coming, and so Esau runs back home. And then that's the explanation for why he comes in and goes, I need something to eat. Yeah, you can take my inheritance because I ain't sticking around here. So my inheritance isn't gonna do me any good. You can have it, just give me the bean soup and I'm gone. Okay? So you can see how they kind of put all that stuff together, because one of the questions we had when we talked about that was, why is he eating bean soup? He's a hunter. He should have brought back an animal. That was his job, to go out and get an animal. Anyway, that's one of the theories out there. And so Nimrod then, and it just kind of goes on and on and on. I don't want to go into all the details of it, but that's the head wound, the fatal head wound. So that's one of the beliefs, is that he's the one that's going to come back be from the abyss. Okay, just one theory out there.
So he's an Antichrist type.
He was, yes. He was the first. And then you've got, what was it? Then you got Sennacherib, and let me give you the list. That Nimrod, you got Pharaoh, and you've got Sennacherib, who was Assyrian. And Nimrod, Pharaoh, and Sennacherib were all Assyrians. The Pharaoh that was there when Joseph was there was an Assyrian. He wasn't a Egyptian. Okay, and one of the descriptions of the Antichrist is that he is an Assyrian. Then you got the king of Tyre. He was kind of evil. Antiochus Epiphanes, and if you remember, he was the one with the Maccabees. He was the one who built the statue of Jupiter or Zeus in the temple, and then sacrificed a pig in there. You don't remember that one? Okay, well, we don't have that in our Bible, so that's one of the reasons why the book of Maccabees has been taken out. It was in the original Bible, and they took it out. That's where the Hanukkah comes from, is that whole battle between the Jews, the Maccabees, and him.
So what we have is a canonized Bible, that's when that was taken out, when it was canonized, is that right?
That's my understanding. I believe the Catholic Bible still has it in
does.
there. Yeah. Okay. And then you've got the now is would have been, if we look at 90, those are the ones that happened. The were. The now is would be John's now is, not our now is. So the now is when John was alive, is based on our timeline, would have been Domitian, because he persecuted all the Christians. And then the one who come for John could very well be Hitler, because he was there for a short time. Okay, and he persecuted all the Jews. I think Stalin's just as good as a guess as Hitler, but at any rate. So, and I throw that out there not to, I just want everybody to be as uncomfortable as I am with all the information. So, welcome to my world. So anyway, we have that. That's one whole train of thought, you know, as we go, and this is the thing that's frustrating about Revelation. The more you try to dig into it, the more you find all these branches, and it's like, well, they say this and they have pretty good, then they say this and they have pretty, and you're like, it gets mind-boggling. Okay, so at any rate, he will go to destruction. That means he's gonna lose. He's gonna die. All right. Now the thing about the Book of Life, I did some research on that, and to not very good results, because there's a question, because there is a Book of Life that is the Lamb's Book of Life, and then there's a Book of Life that God has, and the argument I saw, the most consistent argument I saw, was this was an argument for the elect, that God knows who's going to be a believer from the beginning. And if your name's not written in this Book of Life, I've heard two arguments. One is that that's what it is, and the other one is that it's just when you're born, your name's put in this book. Just, you know, who lives, whoever is living, who's been born, is written in this book. And in the Lamb's Book of Life are those who become believers, who believe in Christ. Okay, so but this says those whose name have not been written in the Book of Life. Well, that would be undead people or unborn people, which doesn't make much sense. So maybe this is one of those deals we just don't totally understand. You know, God knows, obviously, because he's outside of time, and he knows who's going to become believers and who aren't. But ultimately, it'll be those who aren't written in the Book of Life are those that reject Christ. Okay, and these will be the ones that will who will choose to follow the beast. Okay.
So what's the difference between the two books again?
Well, the one argument is the Book of Life is the book that this is option A. The Book of Life is the list of everyone that's ever been born. And then with that will come the Lamb's Book of Life, which are those who become believers. Those two go together. The other argument is the Book of Life is, first of all, it's not really a book, but it's the list of those who are going to become believers, that God knows will become believers, which is predestination, the elect, which, you know, that's Calvinism, and I don't even want to get to Calvinism. I have a hard time with it. But at any rate, so those are the two arguments. Do you have something?
No.
Okay.
I was just Googling.
Okay.
I think that your name is put in the Lamb's Book of Life when you accept Jesus as your Savior, that
Yeah.
your name is added, is put in that book then.
Yes. Well, that's the argument. Because you have two terms.
Yeah.
Both of them exist in the Bible, and so why do you have these two different descriptions of the same book if it's the same book? So I'm just giving you all these arguments, and because I don't want you thinking that I know everything. I know you have a problem with that anyway, but I saw you roll your eyes, Jessica. Okay, so verse 9.
You are
Verse
so
9.
funny.
Here's the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. All right, this word wisdom is very important. If you have, you might want to underline this or highlight it. This isn't book knowledge. Wisdom comes from where? God. So where do you get God's wisdom from?
The Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit and
God.
yes. The Bible, the Bible. Okay? So it's all of those things part and parcel. Yeah, you just can't read the Bible and get it. There's prayer that's involved, it's the moving of the Holy Spirit, it's the reading, but it's the reading of the Word. You don't get wisdom by going to college. Wisdom only comes from God.
Certainly.
Especially today. Especially today. But what you're getting there is knowledge. You're not getting wisdom. What?
Daniel 12:4. This ties into the book and the wisdom. Daniel 12:4. But thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased.
Yeah.
Ties right in there.
Yeah, it does. So this idea that, we think that the more knowledge we have, the brainier we are, right? That's what we think. I mean, not necessarily us, but I've forgotten more things than I've learned in my life. They just have to come back every once in a while. The file cabinet opens up and something comes out. But at any rate, so wisdom comes from God, not from man, and that's why the word wisdom is used. All right. So the 7 heads and 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Okay. What is the traditional description or definition of what these 7 hills are? Any idea?
I've heard Rome.
Rome. Why?
7 hills.
Right. Rome was built on 7 hills. So people go, oh, well, this is Rome. Now, remember that who it is that's saying this is Rome, because this is not a good thing. This is not a compliment. So it's the Protestant definition of what the mountains are, the 7 hills. And the word mountain there can be hill. It doesn't have to be mountain. It can be hill. Is that it's Rome because that makes who the bad guy in the end? The Catholics, because that's Roman Catholics, right? Okay. Now, the thing about the word mountain is that if we're talking about prophecy, it's very dangerous. You have to be very careful how you interpret these. It could be physical. It could be a physical mountain. So you could say, yeah, 7 mountains, 7 hills. That makes sense. It's Rome. But mountain is used in the Bible to represent kingdoms. So it's not cut and dry, well, this is Rome. It could be that this is talking about 7 mountains, talking about 7 kingdoms that have come and gone. Now, it's getting, yes?
Well, back in verse 1, the end of verse 1, she sitteth upon many waters, and we said that was nations.
Nations,
right?
people, yeah.
So waters and mountains are basically the same thing?
Yeah. No. Waters would be people, whereas mountains would be kingdoms.
Okay.
So let's say that Greece, the Greek Empire, would represent that set of rules and countries and stuff that were conquered by Greece when they control all the people. So you have the mountains, the mountain that represents that kingdom, whereas the individuals are
Okay.
part of the water.
Population.
Right. Make sense?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay. All right, verse 10. And they are 7 kings. So, okay, now we've got differences in translations here as well. First of all, some of you have what I just read as part of verse 9. I don't know why they're separated. Some is, some isn't. But now what this angel is saying is that they're also, these 7 mountains or hills are also kings. So we have basically here a political system, and then we have a person. Okay, now it's starting to get confusing. What do you have? No? All right, so 5, so now we're talking about that in this version it's saying that the mountains represent both kingdoms and people. There's disagreement as to that some say the mountains represent kingdoms, and then there's kings that are totally separate. But it would make sense to me that if you're in a kingdom like the Egyptian kingdom, the Pharaoh, it represents that kingdom. An individual will represent that kingdom. You talk about Alexander the Great, what do you think about? Greece. Talk about Julius Caesar, what do you think about? Rome. Okay? So that's my opinion. So anyway, 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. So now we've got these lists of these kingdoms I just talked about, where you've got, if you're looking at it just as kingdoms, you would have Egypt, Babylon, the Medo-Persian Empire, Greece, Rome, and then Rome revised. Okay, because it says one that has not yet come. That's the one that's going to happen in the future. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. So it's this idea that they're not going to be around, and we don't know what a little while is. Is that a day or 2 days? Is it 3.5 years? We don't know. Okay, so that's That's one aspect of this, is that this Babylonian system has pervaded throughout history, and these major empires have been a part of this Babylonian system in their conquering, in the way that they worship, and the way that they run their governments. Okay? I know this is getting muddy. I understand that. I'm there with you. Okay? And when he comes, he must remain a little while. So now we go on to Tom Bradford has his own opinion, and based on where we are today, and I think it makes a lot of sense. He says the first government is Egypt, then you have Assyria. I left out Assyria. Then you have Babylon. Then you have the Medo or Medo-Persian. Then you have Greece. Then you have Rome, and that's the one that is now. When John's is writing, that's the one that's in control then. And he believes the seventh one is the Turkish Ottoman Empire. Okay, so let's talk about that real quickly if we can. Okay, so we've got this is what the statue looked like in was it Nebuchadnezzar's dream? Just like that. He can only dream in stick figures. I don't know what. I think that was a DNA deficiency. And so we have the statue that represents what? Ruling kingdoms, right? So when we get to here, when we get to his waist, what happens? He gets legs, right?
Yeah.
And who do the legs represent? Rome. Okay? So you've got two legs. So what's that tell you about Rome? Rome is split into two. So you have the West Rome, which is the Roman Empire, and then you have the East, which is the Byzantine Empire. Okay? So you've got this one where the Pope is, Roman Catholic Church, and over here you have the Byzantine Empire, which is ruled by the Orthodox Catholic Church. Okay? Rome, this part of the empire is gone. It gets taken over and becomes pretty much ineffectual for a long time. This empire continues on until the Islam, also known as the Moors, begin to come through and begin to conquer lands. They move up through, they conquer all of the Middle East there, Israel in that area, and then they move up into Europe. They move into Turkey, and they conquer that part of the known world and create the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire remains until 1912 or something like that. They were involved in World War I. And they were Muslim. And so they conquered much of what had been the Roman Empire. And when you look throughout history, you see all these major empires that come up don't necessarily add new territory. They're kind of gulping up the empire that existed before. So that the sizes don't necessarily get bigger, they just get a new name. Okay? So he believes that Turkish Ottoman Empire is the seventh one. So if the eighth one comes out of the seventh one, who would be the eighth? We haven't gotten to that one yet, but out of the seventh comes the eighth. We're going to read about that in a second. So you got 7 kings, then there's going to be an eighth one, and it comes out of the seventh, which we're saying is Ottoman Empire, and it would be this. What are we seeing in the world right now? Islam is taking over much of the world. And he believes that this is what is going to happen, is that the Muslims will become the next world power, if you will. okay? And that's who they're speaking of. And that's his opinion. Obviously, it's not necessarily gospel, all right?
Is that, I can't quite remember, does that represent the beast or?
It's the 7 heads,
7 heads.
7 heads. And in out of the 7th will come an 8th. I don't think we read that one yet. Oh yeah, verse 11. The beast which was and is not and is himself also an 8th and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction. So the 8th one will come out of one of those 7, because it says he is one of the 7. So one of those 7 is going to produce the Antichrist, the world system that will enable the Antichrist to come to power. And it would make sense that the last one would be the one that would produce the 8th, which would be the Islam. It's a lot of stuff, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. But the good news is he doesn't win, he goes to destruction. Okay. Verse 12, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received the kingdom. So for John, where are these in history? In the future. Okay? This is in the future for him and for us as well. But they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. So a way of thinking about how this could happen would be looking at the EU. I'm not saying that the EU is this 10. I mean, when the EU began, people were going, oh, this is it. It's going to happen. The end times are here. But the EU has grown well past 10. Okay? But it does give us a model of what conceivably could happen. And I didn't know this about the EU. I'm sure y'all do, or did. The EU was set up as a way to avoid, its initial plan was to prevent all these wars that kept going on in Europe. Every couple of decades, they'd have another war. So they wanted to create this union where everybody would learn to work together and keep peace. Okay? They did that, and then they decided, well, you know, one of the things that would be beneficial to us is if we had one economic unit. Instead of having, you know, krones in Germany, and pounds and pences and all that stuff in England, and then something else, and, you know, come up with one monetary value and use that. And that's where we get the euros from. Okay? And it was pretty successful. But with all bureaucratic entities, that wasn't enough. Now they've moved to, the EU's moved to the point of being a political power. And I didn't know this, but America's not the only one who has illegal immigrants. Europe had illegal immigrants as well from the Middle East. Who decided where they would go? The EU. The EU assigned immigrants to specific countries. Said, you will take these people, you will take care of them. So now what's happened is these countries have had to give up their identity. Essentially, they don't have borders anymore because the EU is saying, forget about your borders, we're saying this is what you're going to do. That's why England, one of the reasons England broke away from it was because it was like, okay, we're not going to give up our autonomy and let you tell us what we're going to do politically in our country. That's why they left. I guess some other countries have left as well, but there's a sense of, it starts out as a really good idea. Let's keep peace. Let's all carry daisies and, you know, la, la, la. And now it's turned into this political power based, it has a capital in Brussels, and they're pursuing this what's the word I'm looking for? Not progressively.
Proactively.
Yeah, that'll work. Proactively. And so now you've got this all these countries that are still in it, they have pretty much given up their autonomy as individual countries. Okay? So it's happening in our time now. Certainly it can happen in the future. People will be willing to give up certain things to have certain things. We're seeing some of this in our country today, right now. You know, I think it's a great idea for me to stay home and earn this extra money from the government and not work. Because all I want to do is have food and a house over my, roof over my head and have clothes. And, if the government will give that to me, they can do whatever they want. That's fine, as long as I'm taken care of. And it's this idea that the government becomes this babysitter that gives you everything that you need, and there's that loss of individual pride in accomplishing something. It's that idea of the house being taken away. I work hard so I can buy a house, and then when I go to buy a house, the system is undermining me. I just, you can never seem to get enough. And we're already in that mindset where we're becoming captive to a ruling entity telling us what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And as long as we're happy, then it's okay. I think there was a book called 1984 that was kind of like that.
I'm reading it right now.
You
as a
read it
matter
right
of
now?
fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another driving factor is desperation, because, a lot of the stuff that we've already read the last couple chapters, you've got people who are truly desperate and not wanting to turn to God. So you have the government who's providing things, and after they
Right.
wonder.
And that's the thing, is that they would begin to look at the situations that they're in, and for a while the Antichrist will be able to deal with those things until we get to the very end, and then he can't. It all falls apart. But yeah, it's this idea that if you can take care of this problem for me, I'll give you whatever you want. And then we see here that these authorities give it. These kings give their authority, their power to the Antichrist. They give it to him. He doesn't take it. They give it to him. Now, they give it to him because they have another idea. They're all of one mind, and they've got a plan, and we'll see how that's all going to come out. But they're willingly giving up that power, that authority. Yes.
Verse 12 in the King James. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So the European Union is one theory, these 10. The other theory is that these are 10 Muslim, they're Muslim in both cases, but these might be 10 terrorist groups. They have received no kingdom, no land, no borders,
Right.
but they've received power. And these terrorist groups are very powerful. And like I said, both cases it fits because they're both Muslim. So this is the other theory, that the 10 could be 10 terrorist groups. There's another verse, I think, in Isaiah that is parallel to this, that they have power but no dominion, no borders.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had seen that elsewhere as well. That terrorist groups aren't necessarily about creating a country with a government. They just want to control and destroy what's already there. Bert?
Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to put this together.
Good.
All right,
We all are.
This woman that's sitting on top of the beast, we're kind of thinking she's kind of this Babylonian type of religious system that's existed since the Tower of Babel, that kind of a thing. The beast she's sitting on were kingdoms that adopted some of that, but then you're thinking towards the end, it's more Islam. So, and I believe she's the one that the beast turns around and destroys. So they're working together at some point, and then they turn on each other, which makes sense to me because it's two different type of religious systems. But the false prophet with the Antichrist, would that be in a third type of like an abominable religious system? Because it doesn't sound like the false prophet is necessarily involved in this.
Well, from what I can tell, the false prophet is not directly involved, but the false prophet acts as a spokesperson for the Antichrist, kind of, paving the way.
It's John the Baptist, but opposite.
Yeah, it's, you know, and once the Antichrist or the beast makes himself known, the role there is diminished for the false prophet, but probably still there as a support person, you know, still being around. Okay? Okay, well, I didn't get my wish.
Wait, you didn't go off through chapter 17?
No, this is
One more
ridiculous.
week.
This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
Next week we have some nice pictures for us.
Yeah, what?
We have some nice pictures next week.
Yeah, I hope so.
Graphics.
Yes, we're almost to the end. There's not very many verses left, but I don't wanna keep you all past.
What's the plan after Revelation? What are we going to next?
I don't know. Probably the concordance in the back.
Wrong maps.
I don't know, I'm gonna do, one of the things I'm thinking of is, maybe, I wanna take a look at Leviticus, and maybe do
Oh, yeah.
Leviticus, and see, you know, how we could, if that's, I don't know. I don't have a plan past Revelation at this point. I mean, Jesus could come back before we finish with Revelation at this point.